Today, we're talking about adventuring. The adventuring section of the 4th edition Player's Handbook is largely about exploration, about survival in the wilderness, and the sort of general purpose, moment to moment aspects of, moving over difficult terrain, traveling long distances, vision, that kind of thing. Interacting with the environment in a sort of non combat, non skill challenge kind of way. Basically outside of conflicts is the adventuring portion. And there's a couple of different aspects to this, as I will of course go over. Them. I want to start with skills. Skills are on the surface pretty similar to the way that they work in 5th edition. You're going to notice a similar length of skills, a similar length of list of skills, but they are handled pretty differently in terms of how they interact with the system as a whole. Now, I'm going to get into this in more detail when I do a video on skill challenges, which I'm not going to do today. But I do want to go over the basics of how skills work. So, skills in 5th edition, you've got your ability score bonus and you've got your proficiency bonus if you are proficient in the skill. And those are usually the two main bonuses that you're going to be adding. So, ability score plus maybe 2 to 6, or plus nothing if you're not proficient. In 4th edition, skills have your ability score modifier, of course. And then you also have half your level is added to all skills, whether you are proficient or not. And this, of course, is the same as all the other d20 rolls that you're rolling, aside from saving throws. You always add half your level. Same as with attack rolls. Yeah, so it's attack rolls and, and skill checks. Like those are the rolls, right? You do add half your level to other things, but as far as d20 rolls, it's just those. So ability checks and skill checks, you add half your level. Additionally, if you are trained in a skill, interestingly, they don't use proficient because there is such a thing as a proficiency bonus, but it doesn't apply to skills. It applies only to weapons. But if you are trained in a skill, you're going to add +5. Now, the +5 modifier is important here because you can think of it as, well, you get a +1 every other level. So +5 is kind of like boosting up your proficiency by 10 levels, as if you were 10 levels higher. You can think of it that way. But there is actually a better way to think of it, because if you look at the skill check DC tables, the difficulty tiers, as you go from easy to medium to hard, or even beyond, it's all in increments of 5. Which means that with a +5 bonus to your skill modifier, you are just upgrading the result of your roll by 1 step. An easy roll for you is a medium roll for someone else. A medium roll for you is a hard roll for someone else who isn't proficient or isn't trained in it. Yeah. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that there are bonuses from more sources. Now, this is kind of a theme for 4th edition. You'll notice that for any given number on your character sheet, there's lots more different sources that can add together to create your final total. Skills are no exception. In addition to lots of magic items that can boost a variety of skills, there's also feats. You can take a feat to be trained in a skill. You can take that multiple times. There is also a feat to specialize in a skill. It's called skill focus, and it just adds a flat bonus to the skill. Every race in 4th edition adds +2 to 2 different skills. Some races do even more than that for specific skills. Your background can give you a bonus to skills. So there's lots and lots of different ways to add bonuses to skills. So your final number might actually end up being quite a bit higher than what you might think from the description otherwise. In addition to adding +5, being trained in a skill often opens up new actions for that skill. Not always, But there are different applications of the skill as described in the skills section of the PHB, and some of them require you to be trained. Just a quick example off the top of my head, the Arcana skill. If you are trained in Arcana, then you can make a roll to sense magic in the area. Literally, the detect magic spell in 5th edition is just a skill check in 4th. If you are trained in Arcana, you can do it. That's sorry, my leg itched and I just got to scratch it. Um, so those are the kinds of things that you'll notice. In the skills section, there are lots of different applications for these skills. It gives the circumstances where you can use it, what the effect of the skill is, and very importantly, it gives solid DCs for how these skills work. Let me actually go over here to my notes, and we're going to pull up the skills chapter. And I say notes, I mean the PHP. So just some quick descriptions. For the acrobatics skill, you have the acrobatics stunt, which is just, you're sort of like, I want to swing on a chandelier, I want to like slide down the banister. These kinds of general all-purpose acrobatic maneuvers that you want to do, you can do it. And it gives a base DC of 15, which can be modified based on what the DM thinks are pertinent factors. Those are presented in the skills section and then further expounded upon in the Dungeon Master's Guide. The famous page 42 probably applies. I will need to do a video on page 42 and how to use it, but that is going to be in my the constructing a campaign video. So you can balance on unsteady or slippery or narrow places. It has a table for the DCs for that. So like it's very narrow and unstable is a base DC of 20, and then it can be like +5 if it's exceptionally narrow, like down to 6 inches, or another +5 if it's narrow and unstable. These kinds of modifiers shown on the table, so you can easily see what kind of DCs you're dealing with. You can use it to escape from a grab. It's got the mechanics for that. It's got reducing fall damage, which you can only do if you're trained. So the monk's slow fall ability, literally just be trained in Arcana, and you can make a check when you fall to try to reduce damage. That's kind of cool, isn't it? Just being trained in acrobatics. I said Arcana earlier. Be trained in acrobatics, and you get a free roll when you fall to reduce damage. That's super cool, I think. The Arcana skill I've already talked about, detect magic. It's also a knowledge skill. So monsters that are associated with the Arcana skill, such as, what is it? Is it undead? No, elemental, fey, and shadow. So any creatures with that origin, you can make an Arcana roll to learn more things about them. The athletics skill lets you, do the usual things. Your climb, your jump. You can use it to escape from a grab, of course. You got your swim. All of these have DCs either in tables or like base DCs with modifiers. And then it shows what happens if you succeed, if you fail by 4 or less, if you fail by 5 or more. Usually more disastrous consequences if you fail by 5 or more. You've got bluff, which is just sort of telling general lies. And so there's a general purpose use of bluff, which is trying to get someone to believe information that isn't true, which is usually opposed by the opponent's insight, by the target's insight. I don't think there's anything else for that. I thought bluff. That's what it is. So once you can use bluff. This is really cool. And this isn't even a trained only thing. You can use bluff to get combat advantage. And you can use bluff to create a diversion to allow you to hide. You don't have to be trained for that. That's just basic use of bluff. Since it's a standard action in combat. So like as a standard action, you can make a bluff check versus a target's insight and gain advantage on your next attack roll on it. That's super cool. And really useful for rogues if you are without a party, because you really want to have that combat advantage. You've got your diplomacy, you've got your dungeoneering, endurance. Endurance is primarily for enduring bad weather, resisting disease, ignoring hunger, ignoring thirst, holding your breath, and swimming for long durations. Um, in my experience, endurance actually doesn't get a lot of use. It's one of those things that like the DM needs to remember that it exists and to use it. Most of the time, it's going to come into play when you are using diseases. You've got your heal skill, which is used for first aid and for treating disease. Now, here's something really cool about heal. Um, because healing surges exist, the heal skill can be used in first aid to activate somebody else's second wind. They don't get the defensive benefits, which I will get into in my video on combat, which is, oh my gosh, it's going to be a doozy. It's going to be such a long video. But anyways, once per encounter, you can use second wind to spend a healing surge and heal up a quarter of your max hit points. First aid is a use of the heal skill that allows you to do that for someone else. That's super cool. You can sort of be an off healer. Like it's not very efficient. I'm going to that. It's not very efficient. But in a pinch, you can heal an ally, especially a downed ally. So you're using your action to bring someone else up so that they get their action on their turn. That's super cool. That's probably worth it, even though it's a standard action. You got your insight, of course, which, by the way, 4th edition had passive insight, which is something that I think has been sort of hinted at in 5th edition, but isn't really used that much. And I think that's a shame, because the passive insight is very useful as a mechanic. You've got Intimidate. Now, Intimidate has an interesting use. Anyone can do this, but you can make, as a standard action, you can make an intimidation check versus a target's will with some modifiers. And if they are bloodied, you can force them to retreat. That's cool. You know why that's extra cool? Because that cuts short fights that are basically over anyways. Which is something that a lot of people do, but the D&D hasn't ever really supported sort of wrapping up fights as they're winding down, But in 4th edition, yeah, it's like you kind of don't want to have to go through the hassle of grinding out this creature's last remaining hit points. Just intimidate them, get them to surrender or flee. Just finish the fight that way. It's good. Nature is handle animal to an extent. It's also forage for like food in the wilderness, but it's also a knowledge check for any natural creatures, which is basically creatures native to the material plane. Perception. We all know what perception does. It's got tables, it's got base DCs, it's got modifiers, etc. Religion is almost entirely a knowledge skill. Stealth. Stealth received a rework. So the rules in the player's handbook are not the most recent rules. Stealth got a full rework on how it operates. So I'm not going to bother with that right now. There's Streetwise, which is like gathering information in like an urban environment. That's cool. Thievery for disabling traps, opening locks, picking pockets, sleight of hand, etc., etc., etc. Those are the skills and basically what they do. Importantly, they have I can't emphasize this enough. The book tells you what the DCs are supposed to be and exactly what these skills do. At no point does the book say, make it like a hard-ish DC, up to the DM's discretion, and if you succeed, you might, at the DM's discretion, do something at the DM's discretion. It doesn't do that. It says, here's what you can accomplish with the skill. Here's what the DC is, how to calculate it, how to find it, how to modify it based on the circumstances that may be present. Now, the DM is, of course, always free to modify that as needed. But having the baseline there means that you can modify from a position of confidence, which is very important. So that's skills, more or less, and why skills look the same and are slightly different. The system approaches skills from the position of these are the things that you can do with these abilities, and not this sort of like hand wavy kind of like these are the kinds of things your character might be good at. So moving on from skills, On my notes, I actually have rests next, but I want to do a few other things first because then I am going to go rest. Um, Light sources, vision types, etc. So there are three basic types of light that you can be in. In any given space, you have bright light, dim light, or darkness. Um, in bright light, it's normal. You can see like normal. There's no special rules for bright light. In dim light, everything has concealment. Concealment is +2, or sorry, it is -2 to the attack rolls for ranged and melee attacks against anything that is in dim light. If you have low light vision or dark vision, you can see normally in dim light. Yeah, low light vision. That's a vision type you might not be familiar with. Um, Low light vision is kind of like half dark vision. You ignore dim light, but you don't ignore darkness, which is the next type of vision or the next type of lighting condition. That is, there's functionally no light or not enough light to really operate in. If you have dark vision, you operate normally. Otherwise, everything has total concealment, which is a -5 to ranged and melee attacks. Let me take a sip. I'm indoors, but I am still parched. So, uh, fourth edition approaches vision in a very particular way. Just because you cannot see something does not mean that you do not know where it is. And this is also kind of true in 5th edition, but it is more explicitly spelled out in 4th. Something turning invisible doesn't actually mean you can't see it. It has total concealment, which means that it can always choose to hide. If you're invisible and hiding, then enemies might not know where you are if you beat their passive perception. But invisibility allows you to make the attempt to hide without other cover. Similarly, if you are in complete darkness, you actually know where everyone is. If monsters are moving around, creatures are moving around, allies are moving around, you kind of know where they are unless they hide. And this goes into the game's baseline assumptions that you are a really competent adventurer. You know how to use your other senses, your hearing, what little vision you're able to make out. These are the senses you can rely on, even if your eyes fail you. So that's important to keep in mind. Light sources. Most light sources, like lanterns and torches, will give you bright light for in an area. Candles will give you dim, so you have that sort of modularity. Lots of player races have low light vision or normal vision. Only a few have dark vision. I think it's primarily dwarves and orcs and that kind of thing. Like elves have low light vision because they see well in dim conditions, but not in complete darkness like dwarves do. So that's vision and light. I've done skills. Let's do milestones. So milestones mean a very different thing in 4th edition than they do in 5th. Milestones, it's pretty simple. It's every 2 encounters that you take without taking a long rest. It is considered a milestone. These do a couple of things for you. One, they're going to grant you an additional action point. I'll get into more action points when I talk about combat because it factors into the action economy. But also, like it's a resource that you get to fuel. Take an extra action on your turn. I mean that's the basic sum up. You start each day with 1, and you get 1 for every milestone. Milestones also refuel your daily magic item powers. You get to use 1 daily magic item power, regardless of how many you have access to. Let's say I have 3 different magic items that each have a daily power on them. I can only use 1 of them at heroic tier, 2 at paragon tier, and 3 at epic tier. Every milestone allows me to use an additional one. Now, I can't use the same one twice because it is still a daily power. I can still use each power only once a day. But let's say I have access to 5. I can't use all 5, even at epic tier, until I've taken 2 milestones at epic tier, or 3 at paragon, 4 at heroic. You get it. So milestones give you more magic item daily power uses, and they give you an action point. So it's pretty simple. 2 consecutive encounters, and what constitutes an encounter is it's pretty specific. It's like a combat encounter or a skill challenge. Basically, anything that might conceptually result in failure that is a structured scene. Those are encounters. Um, and finally, we come to resting. Now, fourth edition came up with the idea of the short rest, which did not exist in third, although, well, it kind of was like it was starting to be formed in third. Third edition had some inklings about having like a less, like not quite a full night's rest resource. And fourth edition just really codified it into something specific. A short rest is 5 minutes. It's a 5 minute short rest. So you kind of assume to take a short rest after every encounter to recover your encounter abilities. Because during a short rest, you can do the following things. Recharge all of your encounter powers. You can spend healing surges to heal hit points. And you can identify magic items. Attunement doesn't exist, but you can identify any magic items that are in your possession. There's no identify spell, so there isn't like you can do it without a spell, but otherwise it might be cursed. No, you just learn what it is. You learn all like everything that you would learn from an identify spell. You get it during a short rest. So the identify spell does not exist because it would be fully redundant. So that's what you can do during a short rest. It's 5 minutes. It's super easy. These are for the things that encounter powers are things that like they're stronger than stuff you can spam out at will, but not quite as strong as your daily powers. I've already talked about powers. Why am I talking about this again? So then, after the short rest, you have the extended rest. Now, the extended rest, or I mean, long rest is a perfectly acceptable term for it, but the game calls it an extended rest, is 6 hours long. Not 8, 6. So it's a slightly shorter extended rest. You can still only take one extended rest per 24-hour period. And you'll notice that all of the like rituals that are supposed to give you someplace safe to rest, if they work for a long rest, they last 7 hours. So that you can take your long rest and have an extra hour for casting the spell, getting into the area, finishing your short rest, packing up, and getting ready to go. As opposed to humorously, in 5th edition, some of the like long rest things only last exactly 8 hours, which means you don't actually have enough time to go in, have your rest, and get out. Because by the time like you even finish your turn of casting the spell, you're a turn short of taking a full rest. It's funny, no one actually cares, but it's funny to me that they actually put the thought in to give you that extra hour in 4th edition. But I kind of a tangent on that. So anyways, short rest, extended rest. We've talked about skills. We've talked about milestones. We've talked about light sources and vision types. So those are your basic adventuring rules. Let me check and see if I'm missing anything. Rest and recovery. I did that. It's got a little blurb about keeping watch. No one really cares. It's got rules for traveling, like terrain speed and things like that. Because you have some creatures actually have what they call an overland speed, which is a speed that is only usable for like long-term travel. Basically, you can't be taking combat actions while you're using this speed, but it allows creatures to travel long distances over land relatively quickly. So if you see overland speed, that's what that is. But yeah. That's adventuring in 4th edition. It's a really actually well fleshed out part of the game that I'm always pretty excited to engage with, especially skills. I think the skill uses in this game are really cool. So yeah, that's largely that's how that goes.